To create championship caliber performance in your small business, Your Championship Company podcast provides the tips, tools, techniques, and strategies from your small business peers, industry experts, and even real sports champions who have actually won championships on the athletic field. Athletes who win championships know there is always another level, and small business owners looking for the edge against the competition, listen to Your Championship Company podcast to get it. Here's your host, Skip Weisman.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are listening to this episode of the Your Championship Company podcast. This is Skip Weisman welcoming you to this episode that I'm really excited about because I'm going to be interviewing, and you're going to be hearing the interview in just a few minutes with a very new friend of mine, colleague whom I just met on social media a few weeks ago, and right now we are only virtual friends at this point. But once we met online, I was so impressed with her, I had to share her with you guys. She has a lot to offer all of us. Her name is Leslie M. That's E-H-M. Leslie M. And her company is called Combustion. Her title is President and Chief Fire Starter. And Combustion is a great value proposition that I'm going to share with you directly off their website. And it explains exactly what Leslie and her team do. It says, Combustion is a kick-ass, creativity-fueled training company that transforms people so they can transform their organizations. Combustion is about creativity and innovation and collaboration in the workplace. But as I learned in reviewing the website, which I encourage you to go to at www.combustionco.com, it's about so much more. It's a really creative and innovative website that really speaks to the brand that Combustion is. And there's a lot of resources there. And as Leslie says on the web, the interview, the website at combustionco.com is constantly being refreshed and updated with all sorts of new resources constantly. It's never going to look the same twice when you visit there. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. I did, and I even got a really great idea for my business just by spending a few minutes at combustionco.com. But you're not going to want to do that until you really hear Leslie, because you'll really get a sense for what she's all about and what Combustion is about. So it will make much more sense to you to go to the website after you listen to the interview. And initially, Leslie and I connected in a pre-interview conversation about the power of storytelling and how it can be applied to the business world to create work environments that, to use a Combustion term, fuel employee engagement and fuel your company's brand engagement with the marketplace. I think my connection with Leslie is absolutely a result of this thing called the reticular activating system, which is a part of your brain that filters out and filters in things that are either important to you or not important to you. And you've experienced the reticular activating system when you've purchased certain very important items, especially a car. People tell me that they've had this experience that I've also had, that when you decide to buy a car or you actually buy a new car, you begin seeing that same type of car all around you, much more prominently. And it's not that other people got the same idea as you at the same time, but what you end up seeing now is that same vehicle because it's more important to you. You now have a relationship with it. Same thing here. I started to think about creating a keynote address for leadership storytelling. And so I have been on a quest for the better part of this year, since 2017 started, to really dig into the power of storytelling and how to use it in helping my small business leaders create greater employee motivation and morale and engagement and things like that. And so since I'm in the midst of this journey on storytelling and actually creating a brand new keynote that I want to add to my speaking portfolio, which I'm calling the 3 stories leaders must consistently communicate to inspire and motivate, obviously Leslie's connection with storytelling caught my attention. So I reached out to her, and she has agreed to be on the Your Championship Company podcast. So here she is. So come with me, meet my newest friend, Leslie M. of Combustion, and let's dive into the interview, and we will see you on the other side. So, Leslie, welcome to the Your Championship Company podcast, and let's just start out by talking about your company. Your company is Combustion, which is a really great name, unique, and just wondering where it came from and what message are you trying to convey with it?
Well, there was a couple of, this is what happens first when you ask a creative director, a former creative director, to come up with a company name, I think. But there were a couple of concepts that we felt very strongly about. First of all, when it comes to training and development, you need to change stuff. You need to blow it up and put it all back together. So that was part of it, this notion of blowing things up. And the second part was, there are certain things that have to be in place in order to start that fire. And we want to set people on fire, ignite that passion for learning and passion for change. And just like in the process of combustion, you need heat, you need spark, you need flame in order to achieve combustion. So we wanted to be able to use that as kind of an analogy for the steps we believe are required in order to create change.
Wow, that's really it's a great approach, and it kind of fits with your brand of trying to shake things up and make change and get people really engaged and sort of quote fired up, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So when did you first develop these arsonist tendencies? Give us a little bit about your background and how you came to this place.
Well, I've always been a troublemaker, for sure, and I have never been much of a conformist, and I really have had an unusual professional history. I started off, I was a singer in a punk band, a punk and new wave band. That was my first passion, which kind of accidentally led me into the film industry, where I worked as a script analyst and a script editor and a script doctor. So that's when I fell in love with the craft of storytelling and structure and how powerful the words could be on the page in order to translate into experiences. It just completely blew my mind. And then again, quite by accident, I was pitching a TV concept to a production company because I'd fallen in love with structure. I thought, I can write a TV proposal and I can perhaps get some kind of cool TV deal with my proposal. And as it happened, because I was doing my big whole dog and pony and let's put on a show thing, I was offered a talk show by one of these production companies, which came completely out of left field. And I went, clearly you're a genius. Of course I should be on camera. And that led me into a career in TV for about 5 years, which I really loved, but I found the downsides outweigh the upsides. And I really loved the communication part, but I didn't like the trappings of it. I wasn't really interested in having people up in my face and bugging me. And I was living in the UK, and in the UK, it's a very small country. So when you get a little teeny tiny bit famous, you get famous, and you have none of the advantages and all of the disadvantages. And so I moved back to Canada from the UK after living there for 15 years and started to work in advertising, which again, I loved with a passion. But I really saw that this was a very flawed industry in terms of its ability to collaborate and its understanding of what creativity was. And my own, I think, understanding at that point was pretty limited. So I went on a bit of a vision quest, and I studied at the Creative Problem Solving Institute and the Creative Education Foundation. And what I learned about applied creativity was so mind-blowing, life-changing, that I decided I was going to quit my job and start a training company. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I really felt like I could help people more from the outside than from the inside. You know, advertising can be very challenging, very political. It's very fragmented and siloed, like many industries. And so that's what I did. And that was 10 years ago. And it's crazy what's happened since.
Yeah. It seems like you're doing extremely well, and things have taken off for you, and it's probably a good timing for this, because I get a lot of calls and people asking me a lot of questions around my communication work, around creativity and collaboration, and how that all fits together with innovation and things like that. Mm-hmm. So what have you found to be the keys for, I guess, creativity, collaboration, and innovation? What are the components that have to build the combustion to make that work, do you think?
Well, the first thing is that a lot of organizations are not willing to accept that creativity is a necessary precursor to innovation. They're not the same thing. Creativity, there's a lot of definitions, but the definition that we work from is combining previously uncombined thoughts and ideas to produce new thoughts and ideas that are deemed useful. And the it is the thinking, the foundational thinking that is necessary in order to get you to this thing called innovation, which is taking things that already exist and making changes to them to improve their functionality, to improve their purpose. And creativity is what you do first. It's bringing those elements together to create the potential. And the other problem is that when people do that in a kind of in a vacuum, or they do it based on market convenience, for example, we need a new product, so we're just going to create something that really doesn't have any purpose and hope that people are going to buy it because it's something new. And what must happen is to really understand what is the problem you are trying to solve. And that's not the sexy part of creativity. And because it's not the sexy part of creativity, most organizations don't understand how and why it is so critical to the continuum. And that creativity isn't just about being unfettered and completely free. When we ask people what they think creativity means, and 9 times out of 10, somebody will say, it's out of the box thinking. And I say, okay, well, how big's the box? And what's in the box and what's out of the box and what defines the box? And I'll ask all these questions and they usually look at me relatively blankly. And I have to remind them that there is always a box. Always. There are always constraints. There are always parameters. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing, because that tells you what the criteria is for your solution. And if you don't have criteria for your solution, you're coming up with stuff that's useless. So creativity lives within the constraints. That's the cool part. I say to them, wouldn't it be great if you could just get into that box with a whole heap of tools to help you to better understand the problem, for you to better recognize the opportunity, to ideate collaboratively, and then to test and hone those solutions. That's, to me, what creative process is.
Right. And so you're really sort of turning the box metaphor on its side or upside down or whatever, because that's not the way people typically think, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a failing. I think that they look at their organizations and say, well, we're not capable of creativity because everybody is so in the box. And we go, okay, let's reframe what this thinking is. There are a lot of industries that we work with, financial services, pharmaceutical, that are highly regulated. Well, that's a box. And there are some things you will never be able to get away with because regulation says that this is illegal, and legal will not let you do it. If you can reframe it and you can understand the parameters of that, you can walk a very fine razor's edge that allows you to get as close to regulatory limitations as you possibly can and still come up with things that are game changing. But people are they're so afraid of this notion of the box that they stay, it's like there's a restraining order against the outside of the box, and they'll stay within, 200 yards of that. It's like, no, you don't have to. You can dance on the edge of it.
Right.
And that means that you don't have to always break something when you're being creative. We do say you need to break sense in order to make sense, but ultimately you're going to have to make sense. It's going to have to work within criteria and within parameters.
Right, and that's to come back and be something useful, right, that people are going to want and and use and buy, right?
That's right. Otherwise, what's the point? It's just imagination at that point. If all you're doing is thinking up, cool stuff, if it doesn't serve a clear purpose and it's not going to achieve a goal, what's the point of doing it?
Yep, makes a lot of sense. So, one of the things that brought us together, and we've only known each other a couple of weeks through the magic of social media and Facebook, right? And on our professional speaking group, and we sort of connected around the concept of storytelling, and we both have a passion for it and what it can do to businesses. Where did your interest from storytelling come? Is it all from your marketing creative background?
Well, I think, as I was saying before, the primary love, I've always been a writer. I've always had that in my background. And when I started to work in the film industry, I really fell in love with structure. I understood it to be something so helpful to refining your ideas and communicating them effectively. And then when I came to work in advertising, we live and die by the stories we tell. Nothing exists until we convince a client to pay for it, to make, so that's it. We don't come in with these massive prototypes. We come in with, picture this, imagine this. And you have to create experiences for your audience that really move them along the journey of commitment to your ideas. and very often they're very high conceptual and so on. So you got to be a really damn good storyteller if you're going to convince people to buy what is air at that point. And you're doing it on a daily basis. So I love that kind of storytelling, and I think instinctively I understood how powerful it was. But since those days when I first started to work in the advertising business to today, we have so much neuroscientific proof as to why stories can help us. Well, forget help us. They can compel us to make decisions, whereas that factual data dumping, that dry as toast information sharing, why that really just does not work. The brain does not dig it, and it doesn't respond to it. So all of that combined has made me, evangelical about that kind of engaging, experiential kind of storytelling.
And what are the different ways that a business can use storytelling, obviously about their product and then selling it to create emotion behind the product and all, but what have you found the different ways that businesses can apply storytelling?
Well, it's in everything you do. I mean, whether you're talking about your company, whether you're trying to, hire the right people or bring the right people close to you, or trying to convince consumers that your product is better than somebody else's product, or, networking within the community. It can be for anything. When you can engage, we think about it in terms of engaging someone's heart, but you're not. You're really engaging the emotional centers of the brain, which are really that thing we call heart. And we know that anything that has an emotionally driven component, there's a term for it. They're called ECEs, emotionally charged events, or emotionally compelling events. And these kinds of interactions with people and audiences have been proven to literally take over more brain space. And so if you want to get someone to believe, all you have to do is tap into something that has an emotion. We are human beings. Every audience is just a bunch of human beings sitting around waiting to be moved. And so it's in anything you do. If you want to inspire an employee to do better, you have to make them feel something. You can't hold up a 360 and say, look at the data here. It says that you are not addressing issues A, B, and C. But if you sit down and you say to them, when I was 22 and I went through this struggle and this is how I felt and this is what I believed and these are the challenges and this is what I did and this is how it changed me. Tell me about something that happened to you that you felt, okay, great. Now, how can we use that to make a better development plan for you? How can we help you to hold on to that passion? At that point, the employees their eyes are probably filled with tears and they are so committed. The really cool thing, too, in terms of making it a selling tool is when we tell stories, there are two things that happen. There's neurocoupling and mirroring. And what that means is the brain waves of the storyteller, the brain waves of the audience align with the brain waves of the storyteller. You know how powerful that is? The two halves become one. We become the same in those moments. So even the experiences that as the storyteller, as the compeller, I can get you to think and feel what I am thinking and feeling, and you won't be able to distinguish it from your own thoughts and feelings. If that is not the most powerful selling tool on the planet, I don't know what is.
Right. And is that related to the fact that, as I'm thinking about the power and the connection of storytelling that you're speaking about, I get the sense that, okay, if I'm hearing a story about, let's say, the experience you just talked about somebody going through a development thing in their professional career, and I hear that person's story, me as the audience member, I would start sort of relating my own experience with that, right? If I'm hearing his or her experience of development, how does this connect with my experience, and what did I do to break through a challenge, or what was the challenges I had to face to get where I am today? You start making those connections.
Yes, that is the definition of being inspired. That's what being inspired means. When we think about when we go and we go to conferences and we listen to speakers, and they're up there for, let's say, an hour, they're weaving these carefully, as we know because we're in this game, these carefully crafted stories that may be a combination of small elements that ladder up to a bigger story that still has classic structure. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It's going to have a midpoint. There's going to be a setup and a payoff. All of those are classic story elements that should exist in everything. And those little stories that they're telling and the way that they ladder up to these big stories, we are going to feel things in the presence of those stories. And when we leave, we're like vibrating with excitement and inspiration. That's exactly what is the purpose of that kind of storytelling. Whereas if we were sitting at the feet of data dumpers who just barfed a whole series of numbers, and though those numbers may be highly compelling as numbers, they're not going to move us. They require the storyteller to take the numbers, take the data, move it through them, and turn it into insightful stories. Because the numbers don't matter. It's what the numbers mean that matters.
Right.
So it's our job as storytellers to interpret what the numbers mean and turn them into those same elements of compelling stories.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. I've sat through enough presentations with PowerPoint slides and numbers where people's eyes glaze over and they fall asleep and they walk out nodding their head that, yeah, I got it, and then nothing happens and they don't understand what the meaning is behind it. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many reasons. When you share data with an audience, only 2 parts of the brain light up that respond to data, as opposed to countless areas. The brain becomes a freaking pinball machine when you stimulate it with stories. You can say the word cinnamon to an audience, and not only will it evoke, they'll go, oh yes, cinnamon, I know what that is. But it's been tested that they can smell the cinnamon and they can taste the cinnamon just by saying the word cinnamon. They know exactly what that feels like, and the taste becomes reminiscent to them, and so on. You imagine how powerful it is when you give them numbers, nothing happens. They kind of go, okay, and that means what? They're waiting for that. They're waiting for the payoff. And if you don't give it to them, then they fail to be able to retain the data that you just gave them.
Right, because there's really no reference point or context for it that they can relate to. Yeah, cool.
Yep.
So can you tell us a story about how storytelling has made a difference for some of the folks that you've worked with? What have you done with this?
Well, my favorite thing in the moment, we're doing a big leadership program in a large, global financial services organization, and on the technology side. So I want you to imagine for a second, technology, financial services. It doesn't get much drier than that. That's right. About as dry as it gets, and as data-driven as it gets. And as part of this leadership program, they recognize that they want the future leaders of this organization to be more creative and to be more compelling storytellers. Very big ask, because the perception that these people have of their role is to be really kind of stoic and to be very buttoned down and to be rule followers and to be leaders in the driest sense. And we come in and run them through this program, which takes them through creative process development with a workshop that we have called Think Lab, which just blows up their thinking completely and teaches them how to take risks and to really push their ideas and to really really dance on that razor's edge. And then out of that, they're supposed to solve some big bank problems. They're working in teams and they have to come with these incredibly challenging solutions to big problems. And then we train them on presentation skills and storytelling. And we do a series with them because we look at the authentic human being, which is absolutely critical. Then we look at content and storytelling, and then we look at understanding your audience and being able to adapt and make sure that you have the right story for the right audience. So we take them through that training while we are pulling this solution through the whole thing. So at the end, they're telling these incredible team stories. So this is the second group of future leaders that we've taken through this. The first one was very, very successful, got a lot of attention, and culminated in a big presentation where 4 teams get up in front of very senior leadership. Because of this attention, this cohort of learners were facing an audience of 85 people. And these were the highest level in the organization, the entire C-suite, and all of their managers. Now remember, the people that we're training are already very senior. So this is at the highest echelon of the bank. And they refer to it as Leslie's House of Pain, which is so funny because we really do break them down and get them to challenge everything that they've been told within the bank. And when they finally get up and do those presentations, these presentations are so radically different. They're experiential. They're theatrical. I only allow them to have one slide. If they're going to use slides at all, only one slide can feature any data whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Only one slide, and it has to be absolutely minimal because you need to have the numbers in your head because they need to make sense to you. You need to understand them as an intrinsic part of your story. So came the day last week when they had to get up and present. They're excited. They're terrified. It is proof of concept for them. You know, is what we have been taught real and valid, or did we just waste, 5 months of our time? And these people were so exceptional, I cannot begin to tell you. And the chins were just on the ground by the entire C-suite. And one of the teams proposed this really interesting, radical, beautiful solution. And they were asking for a sum of money because there should always be an ask, even though that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this presentation is to prove learning, but it should be structured as anything else would be. And there was an ask at the end. And after their presentation, one of the C-level guys put up their hand and they said, I'll give you your money. And that was it. And so by the end of it, all the 4 teams, they got a standing ovation and cheers all around, and everybody was saying those are the most exceptional presentations we've ever seen, and this is what we want to do here all the time. And we had a huddle after with my team, and there were a lot of tears, and that's usually what happens when they realize just how powerful they can be in their place of authenticity. And I said to them, you understand the power that you now have. You now know how to compel people. You now know how to come up with solutions that are going to change people's thinking. You now know, how to craft a story that is going to have everybody sitting forward. And you just faced the toughest audience that you've ever faced. Now you have to go back to your day-to-day and do it all the time. Right. Because we've proven to you that it works. It was magical. It was absolutely magical. So, and that's the hardest environment you could be in. There is no more uptight audience that would be more resistant to experiential storytelling or soulful storytelling or any of that. Right. And I also want to clarify what storytelling is. It's not once upon a time there was a princess. It is simply about creating context for your information that allows you to start at a point and to have that rise to a midpoint where you raise the stakes, you create tension, you create a sense of the unknown, and then you bring a payoff into it. So beginning, middle, and end. And you can mess with that. For example, let's say you're trying to convince people of a concept. Here's our solution for this problem. You may choose to start your presentation with the big payoff. Here's the big reveal. Ta-da! And now we're going to spend the rest of the presentation backfilling the rationale. But you still need to follow that beginning, middle, and end, that setup and payoff. You still need to have that rise, that rhythm, because our brains expect it. Aristotle taught us what storytelling is, and we don't want to mess with it because it works, and our brains are conditioned for that. You could choose to use the midpoint as your big reveal for your solution. So you create the anticipation, you create the need, the urgency for it, you reveal it, and then you spend the rest of the time rationalizing and cementing. It may be that you do the big reveal at the end, and you use the beginning to set up, you create the tension, the fear, the if we don't in the middle, for example, and then you come down to the big payoff. There's a reason why the end of a story is referred to as the climax. Because it's the release, it's the satisfaction, it's the, oh, yes. That's what happens at the end of a story. That's why we love and hate cliffhangers. Because we love the anticipation, and we will wait 6 months to come back to get the satisfaction of that cliffhanger. Because our brains crave it. We want it.
Yes, I hate movies that have those ambiguous endings.
Don't you? Everybody.
My wife teaches me about it, but it's like, I can't. What happened? She tells me, you got to fill in the pieces yourself. I said, I don't know.
I agree. That's why, that ending was sort of okay. Said no one ever. I mean, if you either get the hit or you don't get the hit, and I find it so frustrating when you do have to really put the pieces together. It's like, why? I don't need it to be tied up in a neat little bow. I don't mind a little bit of fill in the blank, but I still want there to be closure in some way, shape, or form. Don't just walk away from it. What? Wait a second. And I say this as a script editor too. I would have a problem with scripts that did that. They go, wait a second. Too many loose ends here. Too many things hanging about for my liking.
Yeah. So how long did it take for that group to actually go through the whole process? Is it a day, a week? How long does that process for that group take to get to that outcome that they worked on?
Well, there's a lot more. I mean, this leadership program is very, very robust. This is an organization who is really, really, really investing in their people. It's my favorite kind of client. So for them, it's really like a 5-month process, and they're doing all kinds of other training, in the midst of that. But we do that. We have a 3-day program, and we spread it out this is for presentation skills, sort of high level, that presenter, content storytelling, and audience, the 3 separate pieces. And what we do is we run it over, let's say, a 3-month period, because we go in with one part, we teach it to you, and then we want you to go back into the world and practice and get some context and develop some awareness and some confidence around the skills and the tools that we've shown you, so that you're ready to come back for the next level.
Right.
And then we teach you that. And again, building context, making people feel confident in their abilities. That's our approach. Being able to cement the first piece until we move on to the second piece, because we know that's how learning sticks. If you just, barf a ton of learning onto people and tick a box, nothing happens. They experience what's known as the forgetting curve, where they'll retain maybe 10 or 15% and then forget about it. So we have very carefully crafted programs to make sure that does not happen. So we do that, and then a month later we come back and we throw another angle into it, which is understanding and adapting to audiences, and it culminates in kind of a final exam. And then we have a series of what we refer to as follow-on learning, sustainment learning, that we provide 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks after the learning, these crazy little challenges that we do with people that they really look forward to make sure they're practicing, making sure that the skills are staying top of mind so that they don't just forget it. We also provide manager support notes, because we know that one of the biggest challenges for learners is they go back into their organization. They're changed if we've done our jobs right, but now they're trying to roll boulders uphill because the people around them go, just shut up and get back to work.
Right.
And they're not interested in the new concepts. So we send support notes to say, hey, here's what your people are going to be learning, and here are ways to support them and reinforce that learning and make sure you don't get in the way of that learning being cemented. Here's how you're going to protect your investment. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, oftentimes when I'm doing trainings for my stuff, I get this is stuff great, I love it, I want to do it, and I'm going to practice this. And what about my boss? What are they? How are they associating to this? Yeah,
exactly. That's how we figure that out. Because one of the questions that we ask on our feedback forms is, what, if anything, would stand in the way of you putting this learning to use? Because we wanted to know what people were thinking, and we saw in a lot of cases people would say, well, my boss, has another way of doing it, and so on and so forth. So we went, okay, let's deal with that. So we started to create these managers support notes and so on and so forth. And actually, a client just told me yesterday, I was in Chicago working with a client, and they said to me, hey, they've been a client for about 4 years, and we have, in that organization, they now have data to prove how the training that we're doing with them is working and moving the needle, and how the people who have been trained by us versus the people who have not have been rising through the ranks more quickly. So they have more people who have been promoted who have been in our programs than in any other part of the organization, which is very interesting. And they said, what we're seeing now is that whereas, a year and a half ago, when we asked that question, what, if anything, is standing in the way of your learning, they would say, my boss. Now they're saying, nothing but myself. There is nothing standing in my way other than my desire to do it. So we as a team, because we partner with our clients big time, we as a team have figured out how to move that barrier away so that it's down to the individual and their own potential so that their ability to apply the learning is limitless. So important. And most organizations don't even think about that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very cool. Great testimonial for those type of measurable results you're looking for.
Yes, measurable is everything.
Yeah. So, what would you say to a small business owner who really doesn't get it, doesn't understand the power of storytelling, who's just as data-driven and what it can do for their work environment? What would you say to them to get them to buy into this concept and to begin thinking about applying it?
Well, hopefully everything I've said so far is going to help because it's pretty incontrovertible. It is so proven now. It shouldn't be a nice to have. It's a must have. And I think what you can do in the smallest way is when someone in the organization, whether it's you or someone else in the organization, comes to you with an ask, however they come to you, say to them, can you tell it to me another way? Is there another way that you could communicate that to me so I could understand it better? And start to develop comfort in just the human being able to adapt the story. Because we instinctively will create think about it like this. Imagine this. We will create analogies and metaphors. When you take away our data, when you take away our crutches, and we have to come back at it, we usually can find another way to do it instinctively. But if we ask for, is there an analogy that you could give me for that? Is a metaphor? If I took all the data out of your presentation, how would you tell me that story? Convince me in another way. I don't feel convinced. What can you tell me that's going to convince me? So even those little tweaks and starting to change that approach culturally within your organization will sort of subconsciously start to train your people to be better storytellers. I think it can be a big ask when you say to people, come on, you need to be a better storyteller. Go off and come back to me with a story. And people go, I don't even know what that means. So hopefully you'll have heard some tips so far that'll help you in terms of structure. There are great resources out there. Storytelling is such a big thing. But even that, even saying to your people, is there another way you can tell it to me? Is there an analogy? Is there a metaphor? Can you make me feel something about it? Take away the data. Those little things can change culture because people understand that their own passion for what they do, their own desire, their own pride, their fears, all of those things are valid in the way that they communicate an idea and not just reverting back to some weird legacy templated thing that doesn't work. Well, this is the way we do it here. We always do it in 26 PowerPoint slides and it takes an hour and, I would just throw out the rules.
Right, and in a lot of organizations, it's really tough to do that because that type of thinking is so ingrained and nobody's asked them to do it a different way, right? And so now it's going to take a shift in their thinking.
Meanwhile, somewhat ironically, if you polled most organizations and said, so do you enjoy sitting through an hour-long, 68 slide PowerPoint deck as a presentation? Everybody would resoundingly say, hell no. It bores the pants off me. It was such a waste of time. But nobody makes an effort to change it. Right. The other big thing is stop mistaking your presentation for your leave behind. These are two completely separate things because if your presentation could suffice as a leave behind, it's a crappy presentation. And if it's a good presentation, it's going to be a crappy leave behind. To me, a deck is something that just helps you and your audience just stay on track. It just reminds you of what are the talking points throughout this storytelling that I'm going to do. What's the single-minded takeaway and how is it going to span over this? What are the reinforcements of that? Excuse me. And what if you should stray from my brilliance momentarily? What's the reinforcement of my brilliance up on that screen? And that's it. And a leave behind is a documentation of your thinking. It's your sell-up script. It's if someone who was in that audience now needs to go and talk to somebody else about what happened in that presentation. There should be a full documentation of that with the rationale, with the data, with everything that would have come out of your mouth, not out of the deck. So that's a great thing to change in every organization. Just say, I do not expect you to send me the deck as a leave behind. It's lazy.
Right. Yeah. And do you ever really refer to it anyway?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. Well, that's another thing that when people say, can you send me the deck in advance? No is the answer.
Right.
No. What is it that you want? What are you afraid of? Why are you asking me for that? Is there some other way that I can help you? I can allay your fears. I can make you feel confident. I can stroke your ego. There's going to be a million reasons why they might want it. It's important for you as the presenter to find out why and to find another way to alleviate their concerns. And that's how you become a better partner to them, and that's how you build trust as well. And after a few times of that, they'll stop asking you because they know that you get it, that you understand what they're worried about, and you are dealing with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. From a business leader perspective, can you talk a little bit about, I guess, the power of storytelling, or and how it relates to vulnerability and authenticity in leadership and managing people?
Oh my God!
In just a few minutes.
I will give you the very top line of this. Human beings tell stories to human beings, and if you are not a human being when you tell that story, it is not going to be effective. It has to have an emotional core. And it doesn't mean you need to break down and weep on, in front of your audience, although that's fine too if you want to. But emotion is real. And whether it's joy or fear or passion or sadness or any of those things, you have to be close to the surface in order to achieve that. And that's like you have to let the force field down. If you don't let the force field down, nothing gets out, nothing gets in. And when your audience, especially when you're a leader, when your audience sees you revealing your truth, because that's what is required, to reveal your truth, they will gravitate to you so much more profoundly. They will fall in love with you because you have shown them your vulnerability. And our instinct is to protect those who express vulnerability. And if you show me that you have that, I am more likely to follow you because I trust you more now, and I'm more likely to protect you, to protect your interests, because you've shown me that you can be vulnerable. It's that simple.
Yeah, I had a client a couple of years ago whose company was struggling. Cash flow was in dire need of an upgrade, and revenues had fallen 20%, and he was afraid to really show the reality of the financials to the company. A small company only had 8 employees. And a lot of these employees had been around for a really long time, 10, 14 years. And he was afraid to show this because he felt, well, maybe they'll start looking for another job. They know we're sort of, teetering. I said, they've been with you a long time. If you open up and you're vulnerable about the situation, it'll actually turn them around. They're going to want to help, work towards, resolving this issue and helping the company succeed in the future. And it did. He opened up. We opened up the books. We showed the data-driven stuff, but they needed to see the reality of the business, and then we connected that to what they could do to turn things around and contribute to it. And because there was a trust issue leading into that, into my project with them. They couldn't communicate, and they didn't like each other and everything. And that's the thing that turned it around, by my client being open to being vulnerable and putting himself out there and saying, well, this could go either way. But I assured him it would go, in the way that people would want to buy in and help the company they've worked for so long. And everybody stepped up.
Oh, absolutely.
Take that leap of faith.
You nailed it. It's at the end of the day, if we don't trust our leaders, it's very hard for us to find our place of purpose in their circle. And the more authentic we feel our leaders are, and the more vulnerable they are in that process, then we're more likely to be willing to find our place of purpose for them, to be in it, because now we feel like we have a shared goal, and we feel like we're in it for good, and that we can trust what the leader is going to say as we all move towards this shared vision. I mean, that's a whole other thing about leadership in the bigger sense. But it comes down to, how do you communicate that to your people? And that's the storytelling part. So that's where it's rooted in, you know, and then it has to extrapolate out to the day to day. This is how I walk the halls. This is how I talk to people. I had lunch with the CEO of a company who we do training for, and we've become good friends. And the reason that I gravitated so much to him was we did Think Lab in the creativity workshop, which requires, again, great vulnerability. And he ended up being one of the people who really allowed people to dig into his problem. And he broke down and cried in front of his CEO of a large company. And he broke down and cried in front of his team. You don't think those people will love him for life? He said that changed everything. It changed the way, because people went and talked to other people about, oh my God, he really shared with us, and he was open and he was honest. And what it allowed him to do, which I just love, is he said, we had a big, big meeting and we'd achieved this amazing goal and we had really worked together. And I got up to talk to them about it and about how proud I was. And he said, I ended up in tears again. I said, see, I said, you've broken through something. You've broken, they can see how passionate you are about them and what you do. And I said, and I bet you got a lot of tears in response. He said, oh yeah, it was really, really interesting. I said, see, there you go. You broke through that barrier and you never have to go back now. You can be honest with them.
And in that moment, he became a real person. He wasn't just the CEO and the boss, but he was a real human being, right?
Well, this is the crazy thing, is that we're all just, we're all just human beings. There is just because you have a title, it does not change your humanity, or at least it shouldn't. Although, studies have shown that power can change the brain's ability to access empathy and compassion. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So you have to fight against it. You have to actively fight against that happening, because if you're not conscious of it, it can happen to you, and now you have to break through some crusty inner shell to access your empathy and your compassion, which that's not good news for anybody.
Yeah, and I think some of us struggle with that. And we are trying to break through that shell in many situations and scenarios.
But it's a beautiful thing when it happens.
Yeah.
It's like when you hit the lava, when the beautiful lava comes gushing out, and then everybody's happier and better for it.
Yeah. So I have one final question. That's kind of off the subject here, but I was reviewing the website again. I encourage my folks who are listening to go to thinkcombustion.com because it's a wealth of resources, and it's one of the most unique websites I've ever seen. It's really well done.
We're now, just so your listeners know, it's combustionco.com.
Okay.
We changed the URL because people thought our company was called Think Combustion, which it's not. It's called Combustion. So we changed the URL to combustionco.com, co.com.
Okay. And so it seems like, in looking at the website and really learning and digging into the company and the stuff that you do, you have a very unique and creative workforce and team that you work with. How many people work with you? We
are 9 strong at the moment.
Okay.
9 strong.
Okay, great. So what I find in a lot of my small business companies, right, I work with companies that are 6 to 60 employees, just like you, in that size, really struggle to find the right type of people in their work environment. Right? I can't find good help these days, right? Whether it be from technical job skills, or oftentimes it's just the right attitude, right, and the right skill set. What do you do to get the right type of unique personalities to work with Combustion? What's your secret sauce for bringing the right people into a company?
No, well, there's a couple of things. I think first of all, you need to put your stake in the ground in terms of your brand, because if you are really good at expressing your differentiator, in many cases the right people will gravitate towards you. And however you communicate that, be that through recruiters or through social media and so on. But if you have a clear, definable brand and a clear differentiator and a clear manifesto, there are a lot of people who will want to work for you. My VP saw me speak at a conference and then stalked me basically and kept saying, I want to work for you, I want to work for you. And eventually he started working for me. That's the test of a good strong brand. Sure. The other thing that we do is we don't look for experience on paper. Now, it is different when people need, for example, technological skills. I think that's very critical. But you might be expecting someone to be at a certain level. Well, if you think about somebody who appears to have the sort of the foundational skills, then you got to commit to growing that talent and finding the right mindset, because the right mindset is everything. Everything is yet to be learned, you know? And very often people that have a ton of learning or a ton of experience under their belt, just because it's on paper doesn't mean they've learned how to do it the right way or your way. In fact, they can be so ingrained in their thinking, it's actually a problem. So, for example, my right hand, my last two people who have worked as my right hand, and I expect to cycle them out relatively quickly because I know they are meant for bigger and better things than simply being my right hand. But the last two people have worked in the service industry, because what it takes to work in the service industry, to be a server or to be a hostess, you need to be able to juggle plates, juggle people, manage crisis, be fast on your feet, and that's exactly the kind of person I want in the role. Everything else you can teach them. No biggie, you know? So I think it's about keeping an open mind, not expecting people to have, experience on paper, and finding a really cool way to interview them. So figure out what is it that I really want this person to be able to do, or the kind of thinker I need, and then create a challenge for them in the interview that represents that, and just ask them, throw them into the deep end and say, do this, and see how they cope. Because that's going to tell you so much more than do they have the right canned answers to questions, or is their resume nice and pretty. Anybody can do that. But can they think on their feet? And so on and so forth. Let the team interview them. Don't just let one person. Let their peers interview them. You'll get a much better read. And plus, these guys have to work with them. So why wouldn't you want to hear their opinions? And so on. There are so many ways around the old classic interview paradigm, which really doesn't work.
Yeah, that's great. Very helpful for my small business listeners that are struggling with getting the right people with the right attitudes in their work environment. I knew you'd have some good answers. So so if people want to check more about you and combustion, well, should we just send them to combustionco.com? Anything else? Any other resource that they should know about?
Well, we're on Facebook. We're Combustion Training. We're on Instagram. I think we're Combustion Train. We're on Twitter, Combustion Training, I think. I don't know. We're all over the place. But you can find the hub of everything is our website. It's also a lot of fun. As you mentioned, our website is crazy and a lot of fun. And it's never the same website twice. It's completely adaptive and responsive. So when you come, you're going to see a different iteration of the homepage. And there are all kinds of fun, creative challenges that you can take as well. So come and play with us. Feel free to ask us questions, to send us notes. For sure on Facebook, come play with us because we're kind of nuts and we do like to play. That's kind of one of the things that makes us different is we try not to take life too seriously. We take learning really seriously, but not life.
Great, and it fits right in with your brand. You're very congruent with how you show up and how you work and how you play, because that's what you need to be projecting to your clients and being congruent with that. And I love that. So, congratulations on your success, and look forward to staying in touch more. And thank you for being on your Championship Company podcast.
Thank you so much, Skip. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you to Leslie for joining us at the Your Championship Company podcast. This episode, again, I do encourage you to go to www.combustionco.com. Check out Leslie's website. It is a wealth of information, and it's also the most unique website I've ever visited. It really is engaging. A lot of cool stuff there and some great resources. I even got an idea by spending some time on Leslie's website for my own business. So I encourage you to do that, www.combustionco.com, and check out Leslie and Combustion. So a couple other final housekeeping things for your Championship Company podcast. Number one, if you have a question about workplace communication, performance management, creating a more empowered, positive, motivated, more high morale work environment, you're struggling with anything in your business regarding that, please send me an email with that question, with that situation, and I will address it here at the Your Championship Company podcast on a future episode. I'm looking to accumulate those things. Secondly, we have a Facebook discussion group I'd like to invite you to join. It's facebook.com/groups/championship small business. Go there, send me an invite request. I will approve you within 48 hours if you say you learned about it through the podcast. Also, if you know of a company and you have a relationship with a company that you believe is championship caliber in whatever way, some unique way that we can all learn from, that other small business owners need to know what's going on in that company so they can apply some of the same strategies to create a highly motivated, engaged workforce that can perform like a champion. I want to know about it. Send me an email, Skip at Workplace Communication Expert. And if you have a relationship with this business owner, this business leader, you can introduce me to them and we will get them on the podcast with a future episode interview. Okay, that's it for this time. Thank you so much for being with me and being a listener to the Your Championship Company podcast. We will see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Your Championship Company podcast. I'm so excited you've decided to join us this week and hope that you go over, subscribe on iTunes and other places where you might consume your podcast content. You can visit yourchampionshipcompany.com to find more information about what we do here. But until next time, keep up that championship mindset.